Welcome into episode 460 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian D. Felice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. And Bridget and Scott, how are you this morning? We have another mailbag to get to today because, again, it's just kind of a slow time of year, but we have plenty of content to get to.
I'm good. I got to see Messi play soccer at Gillette last night, so that's exciting. For first time I've
saw
ever seen him in person.
I saw a Gillette popcorn time.
Indeed, yeah. I was fortunate enough to be in a luxury suite. Brag. And yes, they had popcorn. So that's what you get for being in a luxury suite. Like can't just get popcorn anyway, you know.
Scott, can you explain Messi being playing at Gillette and playing in the league he is in hockey terms? I know sometimes like you'll see that sometimes something will happen in a sport and fans of another sport will be like, "Can you put this in NFL terms, football, basketball terms?"
It would be like Connor McDavid, say at age 33, 34, where like he's still really good, but maybe past his prime, going over and playing in like Sweden or something, like a league where you would never see an all-time great. Um, like MLS has gotten some really good players at the ends of their careers, but then like Messi is just a whole different level, a whole new phenomenon. He's the greatest player ever. And when he came over to MLS, he was still really good. Like he won the first year he came over, he won the Ballon d'Or as the best player in the world. And so now I think he's in his third season here and he's still awesome. Like, I mean, Argentina just won the last World Cup. So it really is uh, like it passes your David Beckham or Kaká or like whoever else you'd want to throw in that conversation. Like
Ronaldo
it blows all of them out of the water.
is Ronaldo one of those guys?
Well, he's never come over here, so he ended up
No.
he actually just took the bag to go to Saudi Arabia and get all the oil money and make like $150 million a year or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Um,
But Messi clears all those guys in terms of just career accolades and talent. You'd think.
yeah, I mean the only conversation would be Messi versus Pele, but I think by winning a World Cup, I think Messi passed him.
Scott's a big soccer guy. I think you've brought that up before, but my friends have season tickets to the Revs, and they sold just that game, and they already made back their entire price of their season ticket. So the rest of the year is free.
Yeah.
They'd already seen them last year, so they didn't they couldn't, like, they were busy this week anyway. So when they sold it, like, they just straight up made all of their money back. So
Yeah, it was great because like there were questions about whether he was gonna play because Inter Miami, like a little bit of a deep dive here, but like they've had a really busy schedule and they had I think a game Saturday, Wednesday, and then another game coming up on Saturday. So people were wondering like, would he get a rest game somewhere in there? And fortunately he played.
All right, before
It,
opening shifts, let's just talk about it. Let's just get this out in the open. Soccer and football. I never understood it. It makes sense why American soccer is called football over in Europe. I don't understand what the word soccer means here in the US, and I don't understand why American football is called football. You don't really play it with your feet. So I'm a little confused by that. Always have been. I haven't mentioned it until this point, but I
so
wanted to clear my
you're
chest
on
here.
Europe's side on this one.
I think so. I mean, it does make sense. It does
my
make more sense.
my hot take on that is that it just doesn't really matter. Just say whatever you're comfortable calling it, and people will figure it out. That they'll put together the context clues and know what you're talking about.
That's true. I mean, don't get
But
me
I
wrong.
will I
It's
will
it's it's
say,
soccer in my mind, obviously, because of the Americanized version
Well,
of it.
but
But
yeah,
they don't call it a field. They call it a pitch. I think they call cleats like boots, or there's definitely different terminology for pretty much everything.
and like there are also places in Europe, like specifically parts of the UK, that also call it soccer, or at least used to. Like there's been a movement to push back against that, but um, I will say on the American football thing, part of that is that if like you want to really get into the history of it, go back to the 1800s. Um, when it started with like at the college level, they did use their feet a lot more. There was a lot more kicking and punting. Like teams would even punt on like first down just to flip the field. Like there were bizarre stuff happening.
Well, yeah, back then when there was no helmets
It would
and
look like a totally different game if you watch.
no, people died like frequently playing that
Yeah.
game. So
I mean, I don't even know what if American football wasn't called football. I don't even know what an alternative name would be because it's kind of hard to describe it is hard to describe the sport in any other way, really. Whatever. All
well,
right,
we do have some European listeners. They'll
that's
be in
true.
the comments this week, I think.
That is true. That is true. All right, why don't we get to the opening shifts?
I'll go first because I tweeted about this article yesterday, but Daily Faceoff had a good article on rebuilds. And the headline is simply, do rebuilds actually work in the NHL? And it comes up with a definition of what they're going to use for what a rebuild is. And they determine that a rebuild starts when a team has at least 2 bottom 10 finishes, including a bottom 8 finish in a 3-year period. So basically just not just one down year, not 2 or 3 middling years, like 2 legitimately really bad years. Rebuild ends when a team makes the playoffs in consecutive years or wins the Stanley Cup in its return to the postseason. So basically, it's not counting like fluke season, made the playoffs, got knocked out, and then sucked for 7 more years. Right. So like the Canadiens' freak run to the Stanley Cup final in 2021, by this definition, didn't end their rebuild because it continued after that.
Yeah, and also under the weirdest possible circumstances.
Yeah. So like I think you could like nitpick, but I think that's a pretty good definition. Not going to go through all the data because there's a lot of it, but basically the conclusion it comes to is that there actually have been a lot of effective rebuilds over the last 20 years. It focuses on the salary cap era. But they take on average 8.5 years. And over the last decade, so like basically they were shorter right after the salary cap came in. And over the last decade, they've actually been trending longer. There's been more of these rebuilds now that have stretched on past 10 years, including the Florida Panthers, who, by this definition, their rebuild took 20 years before they finally snapped out of it, and obviously now have won back-to-back cups. But
that actually makes sense to me that it takes longer now because I mean back then pre this like the salary cap, like if you really were bad, you just throw money at it. Like you could theoretically just throw money at it and you'd get it done. So if you were like the Canadians, who were obviously a powerhouse, you just and your fans have an appetite for you not doing a rebuild, you just throw money at it. And also, they when did it stop that they used to get the first overall pick, Canadian pick every year?
What do you mean?
So like back in the day, they used to automatically get the best Canadian player.
So, well, first off, that not technically how it actually worked, but that stopped being a thing like in the 70s.
Yeah, that was a while ago, but yeah, so like I could see like throwing money at it being just an easy way to get out of it, but you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, well, and like the advent of the salary cap really shook up a lot of teams, like in the immediate aftermath of it. Like a lot of players became free agents because teams really had to adjust to manage the cap, and weren't used to it yet and weren't managing it very well. So more good players hit free agency, and like you see that this year. Like now, you know, it reverted a little bit during COVID because the flat cap again like forced more players to become available. But now with the cap going up, you're going to go back to seeing not as many good players get to free agency.
Which means you would have to rely on drafting and trades theoretically, but a lot of it does end up going on drafting because those contracts, at least at the entry level, are affordable compared to if you're trying to trade for someone that's already in their prime.
Yeah, and I guess very last thing I'll say before we can move on is obviously the tie into the Bruins here is they sit on sort of this precipice where this could go either way. Like, they're not in a rebuild right now. Right now they've had one down year, so by this definition they would need a second. But as I've said before, like, you can very easily slide into that. We've already talked about how, we think like this upcoming season could go sideways. Like, it could be another lottery year, another top 10 pick type of season. Well, by this definition, that would start a rebuild. Like, that would be a rebuild. So Bruins could be entering into this conversation, or they could actually pull off the successful retool and avoid that second, third, fourth really bad year.
Yeah, and I tend to think that is more likely than them going into a 7 or 8 year thing, just because I do think that you have a decent core, right? You have one of the best wingers in hockey. You have, when he's on his game, a top 15 defenseman. We'll see if Swayman can be a top 10 goalie, and that's if he can be, right. That's a solid start. And I do think that with a prospect like James Higgins, I do think that's a grade A prospect that they now have in their system that can be in their top six, I would say, starting maybe as soon as next season. And I do think, Scott, whether it's free agency or trade or probably something in, one of those two options, and maybe it's more likely trade, I do think that they will somehow, some way supplement this roster in the next 12 months with a true top six caliber forward, with probably in their prime. I don't know how, but I would, if you were asking me, Brian, if in a year and a half, do you think that there is like a Martinez or something like that on this roster? Like, I would say, yeah, I think there probably would be. But to your point, Scott, it's anything but a certainty. And if that was the case, if you were able to supplement this roster in a year or so, and you combine that with their current core and some younger kids coming up, man, it shouldn't be 6 to 8 years. But the key word there is shouldn't. So we'll have to see how it plays out. So my opening shift has to do with a player that's no longer available to the Bruins on that front, and it's somebody who I wrote earlier this summer 10 bold moves the Bruins could do, and this was one of them. And that's trading for Isaac Howard. Howard was drafted into the Tampa Bay Lightning system, 31st overall in 2022. Just didn't see eye to eye with the organization. The feeling is that he wanted to be in the NHL earlier than Tampa Bay was probably willing to allow. So they kind of came to terms that we're going to move on from each other. It's just a matter of when, not if. And for Tampa Bay, they wanted to get it done sooner than later, so they traded him to the Edmonton Oilers for Sam O'Reilly. Now, Sam O'Reilly was the 32nd pick in the first round, last pick in the first round in 2024, of course, by the Oilers. And he played for the London Knights last season in the OHL. Not their best player, but among them. He had 71 points in 62 games. London, obviously, Memorial Cup champions this past season, and so I saw a lot of chatter out there that it's a swindle for the Oilers, and it very well may be. I mean, Isaac Howard is a reigning Hobie Baker winner and a very, very high end prospect, despite going 31st in 2022. But I'm sure Tampa Bay is getting a decent prospect here in Sam O'Reilly. I want maybe a team, maybe Tampa Bay could have gotten more from somebody else, but we don't know what plays into this decision. Maybe Howard really wanted to go to Edmonton. I don't know how much control he even had. Probably none, because he was just they just had his rights. So
I would bet very little.
yeah. So I don't know if anything was done to favor the player in this situation, but in any event, Howard's going to Edmonton, and so Boston or anybody else is not an option. And the reason I bring it up over the summer and even now is because the cost wasn't high to get him. I mean, Tampa Bay they essentially wanted what they invested in Howard, right? So they at least wanted a late first round pick or maybe a couple of seconds or a second in a prospect or something. And And the reason that Tampa Bay wanted to trade him now is because if they waited until later, I think maybe next summer or something like that, the only thing that they could get for him would be a compensatory like late second round pick or something like that. So they got what they can get for him now. But anyway, Howard is off the board. He lands in a good situation in Edmonton. So curious to see how that works out.
Would you guys have traded one of the Bruins first round picks next year, the later of the picks, or the pick they got from the Marchand trade?
Yeah, I would have. I don't know. I don't think Tampa would have taken that. I think Tampa might have preferred to have the actual prospect whose development they can see and they can project pretty clearly that Samurai's probably going to be an NHL player. It may be more as a third liner. Like he has some two-way shutdown abilities, so that might be his role. Like the comparison I was thinking of is like he's probably a slightly sexier Fraser Minton. Like he's like
Scotty.
He's like that style of player. Probably projects to have a little more offense than Minton. So, like if you're the Bruins, maybe that's the trade. Maybe it's like Minton plus something because you'd have to beat an O'Reilly offer.
Okay.
And Tampa Bay, the other reason is they probably didn't want to send him in division, right? They sent him as far away from Tampa as possible. Tampa Bay, Florida
Literally.
to Edmonton, Alberta. So that's probably at play as well.
Yeah. And we will get to, because I teased this last episode, we will have a mailbag portion of this episode a little bit, right when we finish our opening shifts. And we did get some questions about trades, potential trades, because even if the Bruins did make that trade for Howard, that doesn't solve their need for a top 6 guy right now, right? So,
but I mean, Howard could be that within a year or two.
Top 6 or middle 6?
Well, I would say more.
I would say more middle 6, but like I could see him being a second line wing. I think that's like within the range of outcomes for him.
That it is funny that you asked that question, though, Bridget. Top 6, middle 6, because it's like if it's second line, it's overlapping, right?
Yeah.
But I do think like people in the prospect world make that distinction though.
Yeah, I do too. And so anyway, we will get to some people's ideas of maybe getting creative of what the Bruins could do now that they didn't get a top 6 guy in free agency. I mean, you could, unless you call Arvidsson, but a different impact player that they think that the roster still may be in need of. So we'll get to that in just a second. But I will quickly get into my opening shift, which has to do with some Bruins prospects, including James Higgins. And USA Hockey just announced their list of players that are invited to their World Junior Summer Showcase, which is July 25th to August 2nd, and it included 4 Bruins prospects. So that's a lot, and it does indicate to you that the Bruins, a lot of the Bruins up and coming players are American. And we had a little bit of a conversation about it just before the podcast. Dean Letourneau's Canadian, so they have him as a first round prospect, but a lot of these guys, some of whom they got in a trade, some of whom they drafted, are good enough to end up on a U.S. World Juniors Showcase that, as we know, the history of World Juniors, those are some of the best prospects to then enter the NHL eventually. So it's James Higgins and Will Moore, who they just drafted in this year's draft, and then Will Zellers, who they traded for, and Elliot Grunewald. All 4 of them will be in that showcase, which is in Minneapolis.
Yeah, we were debating because I always thought it was Elliot Grunewald, and then just before we started, I looked it up, and College Hockey Inc. has it as Gronewald. So I fully admit there was not time to like confirm with Quinnipiac people, and now because Bridge, I think like I like to get pronunciation of guys' names when I talk to them in the locker room, and like now I'm kicking myself that I didn't do that with Ronald at development camp this week. So
yeah, I think I did that with Matt Patra like 3 times. I was like, "Is it really Patra?" He's like, "Yes."
Well, yeah, because like we confirmed that, and then even like the broadcast kept saying like Poitras, and I was like, wait, but why is Nesson saying this?
I swear I asked him personally like 3 times, like to make sure.
The pronunciation is Grindelwald? That's what you said, Scott? Grindelwald, is it just confirming?
Yeah, Grindelwald. Yep.
Okay, and he plays at Quinnipiac.
Scott, say it again.
Cool Whip.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool Whip.
Somebody
That was a
tweeted
very
that
funny
at
clip.
us. And Scott just has like a mounting list of words that he says that just incorrectly, I think. So
yeah, we won't go down the whole Gala road either. So we'll spare the listeners today on that.
Yeah, we will. All right, so
I'm just not going to talk anymore.
Okay, bye. So Brian, because Scott's not part of this conversation anymore.
Yes.
You ready to get to the mailbag?
Love to. Let's do it.
Okay. So I'm gonna pull up. Oh, and we don't have to get to this now because I want to do the trade ones first. But we did get an email for Brian specifically from Switzerland that I think we will get to eventually. So if you sent it, we are going to get to it a little bit later.
Yeah. What was the sender's name again, Scott? It was something? It was like 3 letters, right? Oh, Skip. Yeah, Skip.
So I'm gonna start with a YouTube comment that I pulled from a few days ago, which is a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins trade idea. So this is M.H. Merriman from YouTube said, just a thought, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins for Casey Middlestat and Korpisalo. And if the Oilers need a second to make the deal a little bit sweeter, go for it. Give the Bruins a true middle six guy to be between Zacha and Arvidsson. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has 3 years left, could slide into a 3C role behind Lindholm and Hagens when the kid makes it to the show. Oilers get a goalie, and they would have a 3C replacement with Middlestat.
So, the biggest problem here right off the top is the Oilers would be adding a lot of salary in this case, and they have no cap space. So, like, right off the top, like, it's not feasible unless the Bruins are taking back someone else, but I don't even know who that would be.
Probably a goalie, don't you think? Potentially.
Yeah, I mean, but like, I gotta imagine the Oilers are setting their sights higher than Korpisalo in their search for a goalie. So, like,
I agree. I
think the trade's not solving that part of it for them. So I don't. Yeah, this would be a great trade for the Bruins. I don't see how it makes any sense for the Oilers
unless they thought highly of Korpisalo, and he's a backup right now. So
I was gonna say, like, we gotta be realistic about what Jonas Korpisalo is. Like, he's a backup. He's okay if he's splitting time. He's not a full-time starter.
So that doesn't solve their main issue, which is that they want a guy who they can throw in net the entirety or almost of the Stanley Cup playoffs and trust in them, rather than do this whole flip-flopping thing that they've had to do in the playoffs. So yeah, I think that's a flaw just from an Oilers standpoint, that it might not solve what they need, the main thing that they need, which they've talked about and their fan base has talked about really a lot since even both this offseason and last offseason. And they also would have to think highly of Casey Middlestat in this situation. If Korpisalo really doesn't solve that main need, then they would really have to think Middlestat was better than Nugent-Hopkins in this case.
Yeah, and something about Nugent-Hopkins that's always been a question in my mind is what he would be away from McDavid and Draisaitl. I think obviously he's had a very quiet yet very like respectable NHL career. I think he's going into his 15th season, or he just ended his 15th season, and he still looks like he could be 25 years old out there. He has that baby face, Nugent-Hopkins does. But if you look at his career numbers, he had that one season. Let me see. I just pulled it up. It was in 22-23. He had 104 points. Amazing season. But if you look at the other, 13, 14 seasons, he's more or less been around a 50 to 55 point guy on average. Couple of seasons in the 40s, maybe a few in the low 60s, and a bunch in the 50s. So, and that's with a lot of the higher end offensive talent around him. And don't mistake what I'm saying. I think he would be a great addition to the Bruins. But at 32 years old, are you better off just kind of letting the natural progression of what happens with the Bruins take place and see if Casey Middlestat at 26 can get you 50 points, 55 points. And I'm not saying that Nugent-Hopkins isn't a better player than Middlestat, certainly right now, but it's just something I've always wondered because we've heard his Nugent-Hopkins' name for a couple of years now linked to the Bruins potentially. And I've always just had that question. I've always been in my head, absolutely, I'll take him. But I've always wondered what he would be on a different roster. And I don't know how you guys feel about that either.
Yeah, I do think you saw in the playoffs this year, for several rounds, when the Oilers would load up, they went to the top line of Draisaitl, McDavid, and Corey Perry, and that left Nugent-Hopkins centering the second line. Usually it was with Evander Kane and Zach Hyman until Hyman got hurt. And that was a good line. That was a good second line for the Oilers. So I think if you put him as your 2C and have good wingers, like, again, Zach Hyman is a play driver. Like, that's a really good player to have on one of his wings to help him out. Then you can get there. And Nugent-Hopkins does have the versatility to play the wing too. That's that 104-point season that came when he was largely stapled on the left side of Connor McDavid. So he can do that as well. Like, I like the player, and if he's available, I'm interested, but I don't know that I see the trade that makes sense for the Bruins. I mean, more likely it would have to involve Swayman. Like, I think that's, if you're talking about the Oilers and what they would want from the Bruins, I think that's it. So then is Nugent-Hopkins part of a package that makes that work? Do the Bruins even want to trade Swayman? Should they trade Swayman? Like, then you get into all that. So I think it would have to be something bigger than what this proposed.
And I think that, yeah, at this exact proposal, it would be a big win for the Bruins if they could if that was just the deal. But that's why it's unlikely, because nobody wants to lose a trade, and it just feels like that probably isn't enough. So I like the idea because I like Nugent-Hopkins, and he probably would be a pretty good fit here. He would be an upgrade potentially for you, if you believe that he's better than Casey Middlestat, which I think that's realistic to think that. So it would be a great player for the Bruins to get. It just, this exact package doesn't really make sense necessarily for it. So it would make it difficult. And I feel like Edmonton has been involved in every trade. Like, they've been involved in a lot this offseason in terms of their trades and trying to get better. And when you make it to the final, and you got to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. So I'm sure they're taking phone calls and trying to figure out how to make that a legitimate Stanley Cup winning team right now. So
He would certainly be an upgrade immediately over Casey Middlestat. Just, I mean, apples to apples, he would be. I mean, Middlestat, what was his highest point total, Scott? Was it 57 points or 59?
I think 59.
So I mean, sure, and that was on a struggling Sabres team. Although the Sabres have had a lot of talent over the years, despite their basement status. But So, I mean, Middlestat could be capable of 50 to 60 points. I think Nugent-Hopkins plays a more mature game, obviously outside of the points, so he would be an upgrade in that sense. I think I don't I wonder. Yeah, I just don't think it would make a ton of sense for Edmonton because I just don't think that Middlestat or Korpisalo really move the needle for them. I think Scott's right; it would probably have to be something for Swayman. And what's Nugent-Hopkins' cap hit right now? I'm just curious.
5.125.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, you compare that to what Middlestat's getting at the same price, right?
How about this? I don't know if Edmonton would do this, but the money works on this. Jeremy Swayman to Edmonton for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Stuart Skinner. No salary retained in either direction.
I think that your rebuild is sounding a lot more plausible in that situation.
What? How so? What do you mean?
Like I think you're a goalie away now. I mean,
I think
do
the
you agree with
problem
that, or
is, I think the risk here is, and the gamble is for both sides, is that if Jeremy Swayman going forward is the Swayman we saw last year, the Bruins are still a goalie away, even with him.
yeah?
And
But I
so,
don't believe that. I really don't. Like I'm somebody who thinks that maybe was an anomaly, and that we'll at least see an improvement this season. It's that's what I think when I just based on watching him so far up to this point in his career. So
and I agree with that, Bridget. I do think. Well, first of all, the bar was so low last year. I think Swayman's going to have a better year regardless. But yeah, I think.
I mean high, right? Bar was
I'm
high.
sorry. What?
Bar was high. Do you mean? Oh, you mean
Well,
he set a new low bar?
he set the bar so low after last season that like it's tough for him to have a worse season. I think in that if that trade were to happen, I too think it's probably more likely that Swayman goes to Edmonton and is their missing piece and benefits the Oilers than the Bruins being benefited with an aging Ryan Nugent-Hopkins who again can give you 50, 60 points and a mature two-way game, and then a Stuart Skinner who, he is young. Is he younger than Swayman? Been to two cup finals, but
Same age, 26.
same age. I mean, he's been to two cup finals, but it's been in kind of a platoon way. And we all know how Jekyll and Hyde their situation's been. So I don't. Despite going to, it's crazy that he's been to two straight finals, and the narrative is that he kind of sucks, right? Like that says something. So but again, if you're somebody who is afraid that Swayman isn't going to live up to his contract, and he only has and his no move kicks in after this season, and this is one of the only chances you can get rid of him, and
Not
you get
only,
Nugent
but
Hopkins in return,
I would say,
it's yep.
sorry, Brian. I'd say it has to go beyond just like you think. Like you have to be convinced that that contract is going to suck. Like in my opinion, like it would have to be more than just like you have you think like it's not as good, but like you absolutely have to be convinced that he's not gonna ever be worth that contract. So, and I just
Yeah.
think that that's not where they are right now.
Yeah,
No, I
and
think
you'd
it's
also have
fair.
to be convinced that you're going to be back in the mix in the next couple of years because, to Brian's point, like Nugent-Hopkins is 32, so if you're like, yeah, he helps you now, he helps your top six for sure, but if you're going to be 4 years away, he's not going to be helping you by then.
Mm-mm.
So you got to be convinced that like you're back in 2 or 3 years and that you can figure out the goaltending once you are, whether that's, hey, goalie Bob can fix Skinner, or Skinner and Korpisalo together, we can make it work, or is Michael DiPietro on the pitcher, or is there another goalie that we're going after next summer, like, right? Like there would be work to do to figure that out for whenever you're ready to contend again. Like, and I think that's kind of, I also think Swayman's going to bounce back. The only reason I would be open to entertaining trades for him is it does kind of feel like that can be the last thing you figure out in a retool or rebuild or whatever you want to call it, where it's like, do you really need a bona fide number one in place through a couple down seasons, especially one who was part of why you had a down season last year? So, I I might do this. I ultimately think I would maybe pull the trigger on it.
I feel like if maybe we're talking about somebody slightly younger than Nugent-Hopkins, yes.
Right.
But
Yeah,
I think
like that would be ideal, but
after, yeah.
I think the best way I can describe how, based off what we know right now, the best way that I would try to approach this if I were the Bruins with Swayman is, I feel like the Bruins owe it to themselves to go into next season and see if he can be the goalie that you paid him to be. And hopefully that means that he is and he can be, and that for the next 10 years, 5-10 years, that you have somebody who's capable of being a top 10 goalie in the world. And if you go into the season and he disappoints you again, and he is having a down year in the final season before his no movement kicks in, you're running the risk of teams around the league looking at him, if you did want to move him then, and say, yeah, the kid's been hot garbage for a year and a half. We don't want him. Or maybe, just maybe, if he does have a bad year and you get towards the trade deadline, could there be somebody with goaltending issues that could say, you know what, he hasn't been great in Boston, but Boston's been kind of blowing it for a couple of years. We know he has raw talent. We'll take a chance on him.
Well,
It would be, I'm not saying it's likely, but could you find somebody to take on his contract that's desperate enough for goaltending, despite him potentially having a year and a half off of bad hockey? I still think that's a possibility, but very unlikely. But I
I
still think it's worth the Bruins seeing if he can be that guy for them first.
well, so Scott, you might have a better idea of just like the historical precedents for this, but like there's not a whole lot of huge goalie trade. I feel like that there's only a handful of goalie trades that are that big at the deadline. Yes or no?
yeah, I'd have to dive deeper into it.
They don't
No, you're
always come
right. It's
available,
it's
though.
it's usually not right. It's usually not the big name. Like Colorado completely turned over their goaltending last year, where they bring in Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood, but those are those are smaller moves. Like Mackenzie Blackwood, pretty good, but that's not a big contract. Um, Obviously the biggest one ever was Patrick Waugh getting traded mid-season from Montreal to Colorado. But that was really unique circumstances where he gets left in for 9 goals against and just straight up tells the GM from the bench, "This is the last game I've ever played as
Yeah.
a Canadian."
And it wouldn't necessarily have to be the trade deadline. It could be December, and the Bruins are looking at him and being like, "Yeah, 3 months in, he still hasn't given us what we're looking for." And maybe a team, is interested mid-season. Like, it doesn't have to be trade deadline. Obviously, that would just kind of be the last opportunity before the trade deadline comes and goes, and then there's no movement kicks in. But like I said, I think the Bruins probably owe it to themselves to see if he can be their goalie of the future going forward. Because I mean, to not have to worry about that is a luxury. I mean, the Bruins haven't had to worry about goaltending in Boston. Honestly, guys, outside of like Hanu Toivonen in like '05, like the Bruins have had superb goaltending for going on 30 years. I mean, honestly, tell me the last era that they didn't have good goaltending. Date it back to maybe sometime in like the mid '90s. But
Yeah.
I mean, at some point you got Byron Defoe, and that kind of bled in a little bit into Andrew Raycroft. There's a little bit of gap there, but Raycroft and Thomas and Rask, and next thing you know, it's Allmark and Swayman, and now it's Swayman. So I think the Bruins just owe it to themselves to see if, hey, this player we invested in, we know he has the talent. Can he be that guy for us before shipping him away? But you do run the risk of him continuing to disappoint, and then teams looking around and being like, "Yeah, we don't want anything to do with them." So it's tricky, but
Yeah,
you hope that he can just be the guy you paid him to be. That's
yeah,
the easy solve.
yeah, his value would decrease if if you wait and see and then it goes down and you're like, oh, then you're not getting as much back either. So
But again, unless you're
you're
like
right.
in Edmonton, where you're like, or somebody who's just, we have aspirations to go all the way, but if we want to beat the floor, we need goaltending, and maybe this kid can be it better than what we
Yeah.
have, right? So it's
All
a good
right.
question.
So I'm gonna go to our next question that was about trade, which we got from CJ. I'm going to skip to part B because part A of his email was basically just not feeling like there was enough done to improve the team in free agency with the players that they added. So his question is, do you still think there's a chance for trades to maybe get some more offense or picks or clear some cap space? If so, who do you think Sweeney will try to move? Zacha, Middlestat, Patra, Korpisalo. So those are the people he thinks. And we, I feel like Korpisalo and Middlestat come up a lot in these proposed trade situations. But yeah, guys, if they were to move active players, I guess I'll put it that way rather than picks. Like, it's hard to answer that question first of all because we don't know what's coming back. Right?
I mean, I think the obvious one is Korpisalo. Like they're at least going to entertain trade offers if they get any, and if he's around through training camp and preseason, if DiPietro beats him out for the backup job, like you're trying to trade Korpisalo. Then at that point, you're not just listening. Then you're probably actively shopping him. So that would be an obvious one. It frees up about $2.1 million in cap space if you go with DiPietro instead of Korpisalo. That could be enough. That's not going to help you get a bona fide top six forward, but it might help you get a third liner, which is something I also think this team could use, especially if it's, maybe someone in their 20s, maybe someone who can be part of this going forward and not just a 1-year guy like Victor Arvidsson. Like if it helps, if it, that would be the ideal, right? Is like, it's a Victor Arvidsson type player, $4 million or whatever, but someone who's a little younger and can be here a little longer. So, that'd be the easy one. Middlestat and Zacha, I think they're here to start the season, and you see how things go. And if you're not where you want to be approaching the trade deadline, then you start to think about that then. But to me, I'd be surprised if they're not here come opening night.
Well, they're the only they're two of a few players that are capable of generating in a top six role, and that's something that the Bruins don't have in spades right now. Now, if you're talking about which players are the likely trade targets, it's still those same players, ironically enough, because if you look around at their roster, you have to look at which players have no movement clauses, right? So, okay, Elias Lindholm. Oh, he sucks. They should not trade. No, you can't trade him. He's got a no movement clause unless he decides to pick up his family and move again. He's not going anywhere. Pashnak's not going anywhere. Geeky's not going anywhere, obviously. So yeah, it comes down to like Pavel Zacha. I think he's probably the most attractive contract on Boston's books when it comes to a player that a team could acquire that's on a good cap hit, but is a certainty of what he provides in the NHL level. Obviously, every player has ups and downs and ceilings and floors, but if you're acquiring Pavel Zacha at his cap hit, you're getting a top six two-way forward that should plug right into your roster. So, but again, that's for those same reasons. That's why the Bruins kind of want to keep him too. And he obviously has good chemistry and a friendship with your best forward, which isn't in and of itself a reason to keep somebody around, but it doesn't hurt things, right? So, I think what Scott said is something I agree with. Where I think they start the season with the two of them. I wasn't so sure about that before the draft, but as we've seen the draft play out in free agency and we see what the Bruins have for cap space right now and just what their roster looks like, if they went out and got, let's just say Brock Besser wanted to come to Boston instead of wanting to stay in Vancouver, and the Bruins brought in Besser, it's like, okay, you bring in a top six forward, maybe a Zacha or a Middlestat is more expendable because you just brought in talent to replace them, even though it's a different position. I just think they're so bare right now for top six talent that, I mean, hell, even Casey Middlestat on a on a true deep contender, he's probably a third liner, right? So like in Boston, he's in their second line right now, penciled in, but I just don't think they're in a position right now to just trade away one of a few top 6 talents that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're trading, say, for a top 6 guy, but if you lose Zaka, you're also losing a top 6 guy. So I guess maybe the intriguing one is Patra, because Patra has the potential to be a top 6 guy, I think, at some point, but he hasn't yet, right? Really. So I mean, he's filled in occasionally there, but he more recently has been more of a bottom 6 and a guy that's had to go down to Providence for some development as well. So maybe if you think he's still got, you don't want to take a risk on him developing into a top 6 guy, you think maybe he might not. Maybe he's someone you trade for a top 6 guy. And I only say that because if you're trying to find the solution to get a top 6 guy without getting rid of one of your guys that are currently that would kind of be what you would need to do, right? And I know that a lot of our listeners on this podcast are high on Matt Patra and probably would really dislike him being moved. But I bring that up because the problem with some of these trades involving someone like Zaka would be that you'd lose that. And I think that people are much more okay with Middlestat moving than they, even though he is a middle 6 guy for them right now. His name gets brought up a lot in our emails that we get because I think people aren't sold on him really being a second line guy. So
They're also just a little bit unfamiliar with Middlestat. Probably like
yeah, probably.
he's been in Buffalo for a long time. You know he's got some talent. He was a higher draft pick, but he was kind of in that prison over by Niagara Falls that we call Buffalo, and then he goes to Colorado and it doesn't pan out there. So you're like, okay, why is he moving around at this young age with this talent? Comes to Boston in a very vulnerable stretch of hockey for the team. And, I thought he played fine. Like there's obviously, he showcased what he could do at times, and other times he showcased what he doesn't do very well. So I think that people are just kind of like the jury's out on him. And sometimes when the jury's out, you're more apt to be like, yeah, I'm undecided on him. So if you get rid of him, that's fine. But as far as Patra goes, I just think that because he's not proven, if you're going to trade him for a top 6 talent, he's other ammunition is going along with him. So it's Patra plus. And that to me is also where it's kind of like you just got to be willing. Is it Patra plus a first rounder? Like then okay, you got to be sure because he does have the capability. If I'm Matt Patra right now, I'm looking at the Bruins depth chart on Daily Faceoff, and I'm saying, hey, why is Victor Arvidsson plugged into that second line right wing spot? Why does Bruins management think that he's going like if you're one of these younger players, it's easy for people to just pencil in Arvidsson on that right side in the second line. If you're one of these younger players, Lysell, Patra, Blumel, Lashmelis, you go down the line. You're in your mind, you're saying, all right, old man, I'm pushing you down to the third line. I want that second line spot. So you want to see these players grab that top 6 role and push Arvidsson down. But I think you're right, Bridget. Patra, he's probably the highest. He's probably the most valuable asset that you have that hasn't proved himself to be a top 6 talent that could potentially bring it back. You just have to package him.
Yeah, on Middlestat, like I've been pretty clear. Like I don't really love his game. I thought he got off to a good start when he came over, and then really trailed off. He had just 2 points his last 11 games of the season. But I've also acknowledged before and will again that it's really hard to judge him with the line mates he had. I mean, like he was legitimately playing with AHLers. And when you're talking about can a guy claim a second line center role, it's like, well, can you put him with at least NHL wings? Right? Like at least don't give him 2 AHL guys. So whatever you think of Zaka and Arvidsson, like those are 2 NHL wings. So now, okay, maybe it's not an ideal second line, but you at least have him on an actual line. So I think he'll look better. Now whether it's good enough, whether it's he runs with the second line center job, like very much still up in the air. But this should be a better situation for Middlestad than what he was in down the stretch last season. And then the last thing I would just add on, like, penciling Arvidsson in there. Part of it for me too is Arvidsson shoots. He's a shooter. He's gonna rip pucks on net. And Middlestad and Zaka are both pass first guys. So if you put someone like Potter on that line, like now you have 3 pass first guys. At some point, it's like someone has to shoot the puck, and I at least know if Arvidsson's on that line, he's gonna shoot the puck.
Can I say one other thing? And that's a great point, Scott. And that is realistically why Arvidsson is in that spot right now, but doesn't change the fact that if you're one of the younger players, you wanna surpass him. But you're right, absolutely. One of the reasons why I've just kind of been a little bit more, very much willing to move on from Middlestat if he was part of a deal to help the roster, but at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, I could still see him being, I can still see him getting better, and I can still see him being a good player here because he's only 26 years old. But the reason why I've been so kind of like maybe a little more optimistic on him is because of how you got him, right? I mean, you got Middlestat in return for an aging Charlie Coyle, who's since been traded from Colorado to Columbus. So now the cap kind of is similar with those two players, but so it's not like you just got him for free, but you got him for Coyle. In addition to that, you got Zellers and a second round draft pick. So I just love that trade so much for Boston that, I guess that's kind of why I'm not like, get out of here, Middlestat, because like it was a good trade for the Bruins. So I guess I just kind of want to see if that trade can be even better than what I think it is now. And maybe that is trading him for something of better value, right? But I'm kind of curious to see just how much of a win this trade could be for Boston. It kind of feels a little incomplete right now because we haven't seen him in a full season with NHL line mates.
Yeah, and we haven't seen him, like, he's been on the second line, but he hasn't been with NHL second line guys.
He was with Maple Leafs legend Vinny Lettieri.
Yeah, he was playing with guys that were AHLers. So that's one reason why I think maybe people should, if they're down on him after what they saw in what was a short sample size at the end of last season after the trade deadline, maybe just go in with an open mind that it could get better under these circumstances. Though I think that the real issue is that when you look at that line as a line, it's better than what it was at the end of last season after the trade deadline. But is that good enough to compete? And I think that's the question. Is that good second line good enough to compete with other good teams' second lines?
And also just one other thought, the Middlestat experience in Colorado, Nathan MacKinnon is among the best players in the world. He is very intense, and you have to have a certain mental toughness to be, I think, his teammate, or certainly that's playing with him on the ice a lot. And I think that there's kind of a drill sergeant, mentality there sometimes. And so when Middlestat came over, I was like, he didn't thrive under that environment necessarily. And it kind of made me raise my eyebrows. Like, well, I want somebody that can thrive in that environment. But then you see Coyle go to Colorado, and Coyle is, by all accounts, like as professional as it gets, and certainly a mentally strong individual on and off the ice. And there was that viral clip
and like someone who can be critical of himself and like
very self-aware.
Yeah.
But there was that clip that went viral in the playoffs of MacKinnon kind of giving it to Coyle after a play, and Charlie's just kind of doing as he always does, which is just chomp on his gum and stare off into space. But obviously Coyle, the Avalanche moved on from Coyle, and I'm sure a lot of it's because he didn't have the postseason that they hoped for. But it just, I see a younger kid in Middlestat not thrive there, and then I see a very professional veteran in Coyle not thrive there. Granted, in only a couple of months, it's not a fair comparison. And I just wonder, all right, so maybe I'm putting too much stock in Middlestat not working out there, because maybe it's just a tough environment for many players.
Bridget, did we want to go? I believe we have a question involving Middlestad and the Avalanche?
You want to read it, Scott?
Sure. So this was from Brian, not our Brian, different Brian.
Not me.
But Pitch said, I got to believe there's a trade in the offing for a legit top 6 forward. How about this? Bruins get Marty Necas plus the opportunity to negotiate an extension. He has 1 year left, $6.5 million. Josh Manson from Colorado as well, 1 year left, $4.5 million. Avalanche get Casey Middlestad back, Mason Lohrei, and Johnny Beecher to help even out the money. You probably don't have to include Beecher, but so he goes on to say, like, Colorado has only 1 year of control of Necas, and it seems like there could be some hesitancy from one side or the other about an extension. Necas and Middlestad, might be uneven, but then they get Lohrei. Thoughts overall, it's 1 year of Necas for 2 years of Lohrei, with various NHL caliber guys making the cap hits work. So that'd be it. What do you guys think of that? I have some thoughts on this, but what do you guys think of this?
Well, first of all, it's very uncommon to see a player get traded back that quickly, especially traded back to where they just came from. And I'm sure there would be hard feelings about it. I mean, a lot of players are at least somewhat annoyed when they get moved. And so that might not be the best thing for Middlestat, first of all. Not that that's really a major factor, but if the relationship had run its course there, then I have to assume that turning it around this quickly wouldn't really make sense for the Avalanche. If they had already determined, like, okay, he's out, like, he's not part of our future plans.
Yeah, I mean that's my initial thought as well. Is would Colorado even be interested in bringing back Middlestat? Obviously, they traded him for a reason. They felt as though that a more pro style of veteran player in Charlie Coyle was better for them down the stretch than what Middlestat was giving. Could there be regrets there? And we effed that one up, and we want him back, maybe. But I'm sure that Colorado just moved on for the player for other reasons besides just But as far as the actual return, I mean, if I'm the Bruins, I would do that in a heartbeat. I mean, I think that Marty Necas' upside in the NHL is, for his position, is higher than what Flores is at his position. I think that's the real acquisition cost here, is giving up on Lohrei's upside. At the same time, and I don't have Manson's page in front of me, but if I had to guess, I'd say he's early 30s, but he plays an intense style of defense, and something that he would bring a totally different element than what Lohrei brings, but by all accounts a tougher one. So I think if the money were to work, and Beecher is somebody that the three of us were all okay with the Bruins not even qualifying this past summer. So all due respect to Johnny if he's listening, but so I mean I would do this deal in a heartbeat if I were the Bruins, but I don't know if Colorado would.
Yeah, Manson's 33. Yeah, I mean, like, Colorado did just sign Brent Burns for a year, so maybe they feel good about the right side of their defense. Like, move some salary out. But yeah, I'm with you guys. Like, I just don't think the Avs would be interested in bringing back Middlestad. I guess the one counter argument there would be, now he would plug into a third line center role there behind McKinnon and Brock Nelson. But that also was going to be the case last year before they traded him. Obviously they felt like Charlie Coyle is a better third line center and is more of what they thought they needed. So, could, like, maybe they could change their mind on that. Maybe they're like, you know what? After seeing how things played out, maybe the more offensive guy like Middlestad on our third line, like, maybe that would make sense. But that's just me playing devil's advocate a little. My real answer is, I'm with you guys. I don't think they would have much interest in getting Middlestad back.
Little seller's remorse, you think, Scott? Little seller's remorse, maybe at best case.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that happens, and obviously, the playoffs didn't go the way the Avs were expecting. So the way they thought they had optimized their roster didn't really work out. So like it does force you to rethink things.
Yeah. So I think we should get to Skip's email because I know, Brian, you got an appointment to get to. So and I also have one closing thought as well. But Brian, do you want to read what
I don't have it. I don't have it in front of me. Do you have it?
It's at the top of the document. Part of it is, at least. Oh no, that's Chip.
That's Chip's email.
Skip. Let me pull it up.
Yeah,
Scott,
yeah. I'll lay the groundwork while Bridge is doing it. But essentially, Scott got an email from the to the Skate Pod account addressed to me from Switzerland. And so Skip, by the way, Skip also mentioned that he's from Rhode Island originally. So that's a combination that you don't hear every day. Yeah, from Rhode Island, and now I've been in Switzerland the last 20 years. But he addressed it to me with a bit of a bone to pick regarding my two lovely co-hosts here. So Bridget, just give me the thumbs up when you have it.
I got it. So first of all, it sounds like he's made great life choices to move to Switzerland, like after Rhode Island. But it says, "Hi Brian, I have been living in Switzerland for about 20 years now, and I'm originally from Rhode Island, where I played schoolboy hockey. I watch all of the Bruins related podcasts, and yours has been a favorite of mine for some time now. I do have an issue with you guys in the moment, though, which is this. Can you guys, meaning especially Scott and to some degree Bridget, please stop the freaking hatred of Tanner Jeannot? He is not even in town yet, and these podcasts are all hating on him and the contract 24/7. 10 other teams wanted him, so that means other GMs are seeing something that Scott and others are not. More to the point, can you, meaning Brian, please show some spine with your opinion and
Yeah,
pretty much
Brian.
As you are the one who is correct in my view. So I'll stop there because it goes on. But
Man, do I like Skip already?
Skip is Team Brian. So let me just set the table a second here in case people didn't hear our last podcast. We got several submissions from other listeners about asking questions. Why did the Bruins give Tanner Jeannot a 5-year contract? So the term and the number were both problems to some of our listeners who sent it in. And we spent time kind of going into what we thought his potential was here and different things. Apparently, Scott, you were the hardest on him. So I don't know if you guys, and so one of the main reasons we read this is, first of all, we appreciate the input, and especially from someone who listens from so far away. And we do a lot of times get the negative side of what people think, and people are more likely to judge rather than wait and see, which it feels like Skip is like, hey, wait and don't judge this deal until we've at least seen a little bit of Tanner Jeannot on the ice.
So I definitely was hardest on him, but let's clarify something. What I don't like and what I ripped is the contract. I have no issue with Tanner Jeannot, the player or the person. I like his effort. I like his physicality. By all accounts, he's a good guy, a good locker room type guy. I'm sure he's a great human being. I don't know him. I look forward to meeting him in training camp. But it is a hard cap league. So when we talk about players, we have to talk about contracts because they just go hand in hand. Like if this were baseball where there's no salary cap, okay, fine. We wouldn't have to focus on contracts so much, but there's a hard cap. So we do. And that is what I hate is the contract. I hate 5 years, $3.4 million a year for a player that I think is a good fourth liner. And he might be a good one, and he might be a tone setter and all that. But ultimately, it's still a fourth liner that you have now given a real contract to. Like, a lengthy commitment for what I think is third line money. And I don't think he's going to be a third liner. And I don't think the contract's going to hold up that well. So it's not me hating Tanner Jeannot, the person or the player. It's me hating the contract.
All right. Well, first things first. I just gotta say to Skip that what a phrase. It's not used enough, but to tell somebody to show some spine, that is an unreal phrase. Like I'm gonna use that probably in my daily life. Like just I don't know where Dunkin' Donuts drive. Just show some fucking spine. Like just I don't know. I just love it. So that is the biggest takeaway from this email is showing some spine is something I'll be using a lot now. Um, Secondly, I really last episode it was more so the disdain and dislike for the deal from others that made it seem like I was I guess on the other side of the aisle. I was just being a little bit more open minded and just kind of coming at it from the Bruins' point of view and probably where I think that why they're looking at the situation and why they brought him in. And I do think that I am more of the well, let's just wait and see, mindset. That said, Skip went on to basically tell me to shove Scott in a locker. So I'm gonna have to do just that now, Scott. And I'd appreciate if you just
I
show.
don't even have any lockers around.
I just want you to show some fucking spine, Scott. Going forward, show some spine. Now, a lot of people don't realize this about Scott is that he's actually on IMDb as an actor. He does have acting credits. If you ever saw Pirates of the Caribbean, he was the parrot on Johnny Depp's shoulder because man, does he just repeat what all the other talking heads are saying about Jeannot. By the way, for those listening, I'm just trying to give this for a Skip. I don't really.
I was gonna say
Scott.
I think Skip in a way was actually more critical of you than me because he said I was loud in my opinion and which is good and seems to think I'm dug in and that's what opinion makers and talk show host podcast hosts like that's what you have to do. And I believe later in this email he accused Brian of poke checking his way into a corner and not lowering the shoulder and throwing a hit. I think he's actually being quite critical of Brian here.
Well, listen, Scott, that's why I'm saying that, I agree. I gotta lean into a little bit more, right? So maybe
Yeah,
you
we
and
could
I
all be harder on Scott. I think we can agree that.
I listen, I think I give enough controversial opinions on here that I did decide to poke check one away just for an easy
There,
day,
there's
but then
days where
here comes Scott the next day and now he's saying, "Oh, well, what I really meant to say was, I wasn't really trying to hate on the player." Oh, see now Scott wants to dig his heels in, but now he's realizing he's going to talk to Jeannot in the locker room. So now he's, "Oh, I can't wait to meet the player. I can't wait to meet the person. I just don't like the player." So
I
want to
don't
be
like the contract. Which,
yeah,
by the way,
yeah.
I think I made pretty clear on the last episode, but maybe not. I think
It's
I
okay,
even said if it was a 3-year deal for like $2.5 million, I wouldn't have cared.
Yeah, I don't think Tanner's listening. I think we're okay here. I think we're good.
I think he's listened to every episode all the way
yeah,
through.
yeah. So what I would say is, I mean, he seems like a Bruin, right? Like by his pedigree, by watching what he does on the ice, he seems like a Bruin in that you're thinking of a tough, hard-nosed player that's physical. In a bottom six role, that's what you want. In Boston, that's the identity of a fourth line in Boston, or sometimes a third line in Boston. So in that way, there is a fit, and there is some help. And we talked about how Don Sweeney said he thinks it will give some of the younger guys a little bit of breathing room, as in he will protect younger guys. And if that is what he actually does in Boston, then that there's a value there. So yeah, I'll second what Scott said about the contract being really what the critique was about.
Can I also say though, like, because we didn't even really get into that all that much on the last episode, that Sweeney comment about like giving space or protecting young guys, like, I kind of don't even think that's really how the NHL works anymore. Like, you just don't like that. Just doesn't really happen. That's generally not. I mean, like, what's a recent example of anything like the Blackhawks kind of tried to do that where you put like Foligno on a team with Bedard, but did we ever get any great examples of like these Blackhawk veterans protecting Connor Bedard? Or I mean, did I just miss it? Possible.
Well, I think no, I think you're right. Like I think if you're acquiring Tanner Jeannot and Nikita Zadorov and Mark Haslick because your goal is to make the Florida Panthers try to shy away from how they play, it's not happening. They're gonna always do what they're doing regardless of who's on the ice. But I do think that the
I mean,
Bruins
the
are.
Bruins tried that on opening night last year, and the Panthers just like walked all over them, and in some cases, literally laughed in their faces.
I do think it's fair to say there are a couple of players around the league, and I do think Jeannot might be one of them, where if you're gonna do something, you are aware that they're out there. I think, like historically, you can't sit there and say that if Ryan Reeves is on the ice, that someone's going to take as much liberties on Austin Matthews as if Reeves wasn't on the ice, or like a Tom Wilson in Washington. I think there are certain players that garner that level of like, all right,
But
I at
they're
least
never
know he's
even
out there.
they're like never even on the ice at the same time though.
No, I know. No, I know. I'm with you. But
Like
yeah,
Tanner Jeannot's not going to be on the ice at the same time as James Hagen's. They're not going to be on a
no.
line.
No. And I will say, and in all sincerity, like with Skip's email, like the reason why I wasn't really coming at, people is because I really have some reservations too about the acquisition. Like if you look at his numbers aren't great, right? So like they haven't been great. So I do want him to be more than just somebody who can be a big body out there and be hard on the forecheck. Like it's a relatively pretty penny for what his offensive production has been the last couple of seasons. And Skip mentions in the email that he did have that rookie season where he produced pretty well, but that was a couple of years ago. So there, I do have reservations about it as well. I know what the Bruins were thinking when they brought him in is all, and I think that the the market for Jeannot was probably more competitive than people are giving it credit. And those who are giving it credit, like Scott said last episode, I get that the market was competitive for him. And if it was, then don't be that team to sign him. I just think that the Bruins the Bruins feel as though that he helps them play more of the style of play that they want to play at least next season because they're trying to do something other than make the playoffs. They're trying to rebuild their foundation and be a harder team to play against. So I don't think that other teams that were in the market for Jeannot are in as much of an identity crisis right now as the Bruins are. And they feel as though that beyond the point production, he's somebody that can come in and help us accomplish what we're trying to do, which is be a harder team to play against. Now, I don't love the no movement aspect of it in his first couple of years either. We didn't really talk about that part last episode, but um, yeah, it's a layered deal because the player offers different intangibles, and it depends on what you value. And I was just trying to show what I think the Bruins are valuing in him and why they value that player more so than the other teams that were interested in him. I don't know what teams those were, but I can guarantee you that those teams probably didn't have the floor bottom out last year and have absolutely no identity going into October. So I think the Bruins are in search of players like that. And yeah, they paid a premium to bring in the player. No doubt about it. But yeah, I definitely think that there is an element of let's see what he can do. Maybe he'll pleasantly surprise. So, and I don't think that you guys aren't saying that either, but you are allowed to have an opinion on something before you see the results of it. Cause I mean, that's what sports fandom's all about. Like player signings happen in off seasons all the time, and you have opinions on it. So,
I
yeah,
mean, like we literally would
Scott just hates Jeannot. That's all there is to it.
clearly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like we literally wouldn't have a podcast if we just had to wait to see how everything plays out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. We would be, I don't know, what would you guys be if you weren't in sports? I mean, Brian has a real person job. Scott and I have just our sports stuff. Brian's a plumber,
I'd,
as we know. But Scott, what would you be if you weren't doing this?
I'd be an astronaut.
No, is that what you wanted to be as a kid?
Yeah.
I always thought, and there's still time that I could have like a trap. Like I used to love animals as a kid, and I could like tell you every single animal ever. I could have one of those travel shows where you just like go like hang out with sloths or something. I could see that. There's still time, if this whole thing doesn't work out for me, I could be Jeff Corwin maybe. But I'm kind of dressed like that today actually, but
25 years from now we're going to hear about Bridget getting mauled by a tiger that she thought was her friend the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, we were really close. But
one other thing before we go is I don't know about you guys. It's a working segment in my head, but maybe going forward, Bridget, you can work on a graphic that says show us some spine, and we could have a segment on the show where
that's actually not a bad idea.
Somebody has to give a take that puts them on the hot seat a little bit. We can take turns on that one.
You know what? I'm gonna add that to the ideas list. But so before we go, because I know you got to go, Brian.
Yeah.
We do have more mailbag questions. We still have I feel like more than half of we haven't been able to get through everything, not even close. So keep sending them. We will maybe categorize them by theme like we kind of did today. And if you're mad at Scott, definitely send it our way. He is the one who opens the email, so it's up to him whether or not to forward it to us. but comment on YouTube, all the Scott stuff you want.
Yeah, I don't send any emails that are positive about Brian and Bridget. I'm not going to forward those to them.
Yeah.
So.
He's like when Harry is looking for his letters from his friends in Chamber of Secrets, and Dobby stole them all.
Yeah.
Well, come on now. Can we see our letters, please? Let me see our emails.
So Scott's Dobby. Okay. So you can still continue to send it. Let me put for those watching, this is the email. It is skatepod@weei.com. Comment on YouTube as well. And occasionally, we'll get stuff on Twitter too. So that if that's where you know how to contact us, that works too. At the skatepod on Twitter. So there was one thing that I want to get to before we log off, if I have about a minute or two, which is, I know the last episode towards the beginning of my opening shifts, we were talking about college hockey and how Gavin McKenna is going to maybe change the landscape of college hockey with going to Penn State and getting the money that he got. And I just kind of threw in a side comment about Roger McQueen, who
people picked this up. People
did pick this up, which and I had a credible source that he was interested in coming to play college hockey. He was talking to more than one team, but Providence was one of those teams I was really interested in bringing him in. In between that podcast and this podcast, I spoke to the same person, and unfortunately, I don't think he's going the college route. It sounds like in his position in Anaheim, because the conversation I had was before the draft where we didn't really know where he was going to end up. At that point in time, he was considering playing college hockey. He had a great development camp by all accounts in Anaheim. He gets drafted to a team that could use him now. And I do think he's pushing, and the organization is open to him going pro rather than playing college hockey. So unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see him in Hockey East. I was excited to see him because we got so deep in the weeds for some of these prospects when we were talking about who the Bruins could draft, that we got into his backstory of his injury and where is his health at. And I kind of wanted to see it play out and just to see what kind of player he was. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see him play in college at this point. It doesn't seem like that's the route he's going. So I don't know if we have any Roger McQueen followers or people that
I will say what I would add to this is this is sort of one wrinkle that might keep some of these top guys in the CHL. We just saw Jake O'Brien signed his entry-level contract with Seattle, which now takes college out of the equation. He's either in the NHL or he goes back to the OHL. These guys who think they have a shot, or at least want to see, can I win a job out of camp, are more likely probably going to stay in the CHL, because then they can go to training camp, they can play preseason games, and they can even play 9 regular season games before the team has to make a decision on whether to send them back to juniors, right? Like,
Same thing that happened with Patra.
yeah,
So
this is what the Bruins did with Patra. So you get basically you if you go CHL instead of college, you have a longer window open to try and push to make your NHL team. Whereas like Hagen's ultimately is going to have to decide, by end of August, basically. Like that's when BC is getting back on campus. So, and starting to practice. So he's not going to be able to go to Bruins training camp and then play preseason games. And if he's not quite ready, he can go back to BC. Like Hagen's has to make that decision before then.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to put that out there that it seems like there's an appetite for Anaheim to go the route of giving him a chance to make it out of camp. So I don't know if that information's relevant to anyone.
Well, his injury history aside, I mean, his size and skill, like people said, was probably top 3 in the draft, could have been. And so it's not totally surprising that he's getting the opportunity to maybe go pro. And I think that the second I saw that helicopter take off from the draft to go to Disneyland, I said, he might. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in Anaheim this year. They're pushing hard to sell that pick.
I mean, honestly, personally, I'd be surprised. I don't think he's ready. Yeah. Like I think he has one of the longer development paths of anyone in the top 10. But
even O'Brien, like I don't think O'Brien's skating is ready. Like I think you're right, Scott. Like I think at most he'll probably play 9 games and go back down. But you're right, that is the wrinkle of how these prominent prospects post draft year could go back to the CHL at this stage.
And there's a couple other guys who still haven't made their decisions, and probably have a month, maybe a month and a half to do so. But like Matthew Schaefer, we've heard pop up as a college option, but like he might feel like he's ready to make the Islanders. Porter Martone has been leaving his options open. I think now that Michigan State lost to Isaac Howard and also lost out on Gavin McKenna, I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State goes hard for Porter Martone. But there's a couple of these guys now who still haven't 100% committed to where they're going next year, or whether it's, even whether it's CHL or NCAA.
All right. On that note, guys, we do have to wrap up. So thank you all very much for listening. Continue to send your questions. We appreciate it as always. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.